Hello, Alex.
Hello, Patrick.
I am no
Otherwise
longer
known
in
as
the lobby of a hotel.
no. You have successfully returned from your trip to Dearborn, Michigan, and you have come back a licensed and authenticated TED talker. How you feel
That's
about
yeah.
that, sir?
I think it went. It's over. That was
Yeah,
my first thing when I stepped off the stage. Is like it's done. I can now sleep again. I can go get a beer. Like that was mostly my consideration. Was not like
right.
worrying about whether it went well, like whether people enjoyed it, whether it was an effective message. Was just it's over because I have not slept effectively in a long time.
But you feel like you finally you're allowed to rest. Your body is at rest. You've gotten back to normal a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. A bunch of these videos started looping on me in the background. I
Oh,
forgot that
that's
our front,
weird.
I forget that our front page starts video players automatically. Sorry,
Oh,
got
right.
confused. So all of a sudden, the beginning of our conversation started again. I was like,
Oh,
I don't know what's going on.
oh,
This
that's very
maybe
unsettling.
maybe everything really did go wrong after that TED talk.
Oh
And
no.
so what were you saying? Sorry, I
I
completely
was just
missed.
saying, do you feel like you're starting to get back to normal now? Now that it's
I
all over with?
do, I do. Yeah, I can finally play some games this week. I
Yeah.
appreciated, everyone watching the talk that tuned in. It was I felt pretty good about it. A TED Talk was really difficult to write because I knew like the kind of folks that might be watching it, such as people on Giant Bomb, are a very specific audience that essentially the talk wasn't crafted for.
Right.
I wanted it to essentially leverage my personal experiences, but speaking to a wider audience, and like even more specific still, I wasn't, the live stream didn't start when the event did. I wasn't really clear how well the production was going to be. A lot of that stuff was kind of out of my hands. So essentially, I wrote a talk that would hopefully be effective for the 200 people in the room, and
Right.
and and so to write something like that is about sort of about video games, but sort of about feedback and basically about a bunch of things that maybe some people in the room could relate to, but trying to somehow humanize it in a way that other people can empathize with, even if they didn't have firsthand experience with a lot of those things. So I found that like the challenge of writing it was kind of the whole reason that I did it. I sort of considered the whole talk to be sort of a first draft of something that I find pretty interesting,
Mhm.
and that it's something I'd like to explore further in whether it's writing articles or doing interviews or doing other talks. Because it's one of those things that when the opportunity presented itself, I sort of balked at it because the entire reason I'd submitted a talk was kind of as a joke. It was mostly just as an exercise to say, all right, well, I wonder what it's like to come up with a speech pitch, and so I made one, and then I got picked, and then it was suddenly, hey, now you got to actually do it.
Right.
And so for me, I've tried to just keep this in perspective in that, like, I was nervous leading up to it, mostly just because I get nervous before we go on stage for the pack stuff,
Hmm.
and then once we actually start, it's fine. Like then it's kind of too late, and you just kind of ride the dragon all the way through. But it's all those moments leading up to the actual going up on stage, and that was the case with the TED Talk as well, where I was not really that nervous about giving it, but it was sitting there all day, like stewing over it in your mind, like thinking about it, overthinking things that you had already sort of settled on as either being a strength or a weakness of the talk, and just trying to just keep yourself as grounded as possible before you actually gave it, which meant I would like have a couple sips of coffee and then notice that my hands were shaking a little bit more than normal, and that I
Hmm.
probably had too much coffee, and then
Right.
I should probably just drink water for the rest of the day, because probably the last thing I had to worry about was actually falling asleep.
Yeah, I would think not. So I managed to catch the tail end of it. I when it was live, I was on the road most of that day, and I had timed it. I thought just so that I could get to our hotel in time for me to sit down and watch it once it started. But literally, when we got to the hotel, as soon as the elevator doors closed behind us on our floor, the fire alarm went off. And we had to go outside for like 25 minutes. So when I turned it on, you were in kind of like the last home stretch of the whole speech. But I will say that the thing I was most impressed by, other than sort of just kind of the tone and tenor of the talk itself, was the fact that you have that presentational style down, man. You have that thing of just kind of you're kind of casually walking around. You know how to kind of present that information in a very measured, thoughtful way that doesn't sound like you're kind of being sort of condescending to the audience. You're just You must have watched a lot of TED Talks, is what I'm guessing.
No, I try not to, and what actually would almost freaked me
That's
out in
even
the
more impressive.
what freaked me out in the last week was I'm sure people are familiar with it because people started linking it to me thinking that I
Yeah,
would find it funny, and instead it terrified me. Was Patton Oswalt essentially did like a complete takedown of TED Talks, like
right.
as a bit, I think on Conan or Fallon or something like that. So I didn't watch it because I was already like not totally sure how I felt about this, and the last thing I needed was like a comedian I really respected tearing this stuff apart. But then I talked to some. There were a bunch of awesome Giant Bomb folks that showed up to watch the talk and to hang out afterwards in Dearborn. And one of the things that we talked about, and what was a huge challenge for actually writing the damn thing was,
Hmm.
like, I know what people think about TED Talks, and like I'm fairly cynical about a lot of them too. And I think if I had to draw sort of like a line uh, in which TED Talks often fail, or the reason people have become sort of disenchanted with them, it's often because TED Talks are often super idealistic in a way
Right.
that is not actually applicable to your real life, or you can't leave it and feel like you came away with something that you could make a difference in your life or someone else's life. And so they're so aspirational that in some level, that's having stuff that is purely just, maybe not realistic, but just aspirational. There's room for that, but it also can get sort of tiring at a
Right.
certain point when it kind of is kind of the same thing over and over. And then the other thing that I found from the TED Talks I did watch, and then also people I've talked to that don't like TED Talks, was that some of the stories that are told are so very specific to that person that you end up
Yeah.
having the very same problem, which is that, it's great this person has this wonderful story and that it, worked for them, but nothing about that is going to help anyone in the audience.
Sure.
And so I tried to, and I don't know if I was entirely successful, but I felt like the line I tried to straddle was using personal experience to uh, illuminate sort of takeaways or lessons that people could actually use with how they conduct themselves. So like that was kind of the general message at the end of, you can't control everyone else, despite the fact that there are, increasing psychological behavior studies and new tools on YouTube and other comment systems that can maybe work in some ways, but at the end of the day, it's ultimately about how you conduct yourself, and me admitting ways that I've screwed up, and hopefully giving people a chance to think about that, and that being sort of the way I approached it. But if you get a chance to watch it during the week, we could revisit it, because I'd be curious to think about what you thought about some of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say about what I caught of it, and what I was able to pick up from reading what people had to say about it, and I will probably watch the rest of it today, is that I think you did a very good job of taking a story and a number of situations, because when I came in, it was right around the time when you were kind of getting into the end of the GTA stuff,
Hmm.
and I think that you took a thing that is seemed like it might be very video game specific. Like it might, if you didn't care about video games, why would I be listening to this person talk about this? And I think you did a pretty good job of presenting that information in a way that did have some broad spectrum understanding and appeal, and sort of like make it understand like why this isn't just about video game culture or anything, why it has kind of like a larger connotation and sort of a larger consequence to it that actually means something to someone outside of your particular realm.
Yeah, and
So
I'll point out, as some people in the chat are bringing up, like TEDx is a very different thing than
right.
TED. Not to be too blunt, but a lot of it is a quality thing.
Sure.
The TEDx are independently organized events where a lot of the speakers are local, and it's a lot of first-time speakers. So
It's
that's
satellite
why,
events, basically.
yeah, they're satellite events. So hopefully, I tried to make sure and make that clear before the event actually happened. But that's things hit, things miss. I watched people that were putting together their speeches at the last second during the rehearsals the night before, which I tried to avoid by my feeling was, it's writing a speech is kind of like anything else you do. In that at some point you just say it's good enough, or this is the best I can do, without starting over, and you kind of just have to cut your losses and move on.
Right.
And so I finished writing the speech about a week and a half ago, and then said, based on how I understand public speaking works, but based on what I'd watched, was that it's half performance, half content, and
Hmm.
you can have the best written speech in the world, but if you just sit there and read it, it's not nearly as effective, especially for the audience in the room. Maybe for video that plays less. But so then I spent half my time basically just trying to get it down so that I didn't have to
Right.
worry about remembering what I had to say and could focus on emphasis and having better slides and like being able to sort of like make the ending sound a little more powerful. Like I was trying to make it sort of like a rallying cry, and so I focused a lot on that stuff. So at the end of the day, I hope people got something out of it. But it was for me personally, it was much more about the exercise of going through it and seeing if it was something I could do in the future. Because there's like if I had 30 more minutes, there's like a lot of really interesting stuff that I think one of the valid criticisms of my talk that people have brought up is that it still was very personal. I tried to bring in some stuff like some studies and some things that other publications and websites are doing to sort of curb similar things I was talking about in the talk. But there is a lot of science out there. Like we're just at the very beginnings of academia and science and psychology starting to look at internet culture and
Right.
finding ways to curb some of the more complicated instances of internet culture. For example, one of the ones I didn't get to bring up, but like League of Legends, for example, has been experimenting with color, where
Mhm.
in the loading screens, certain colors predispose you to more aggressive comments when you are playing the game, when you win, you lose. And they have found by just changing the colors that players see before they start a game, it changes by a noticeable percentage how they act. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening that I just did not have time for. And I actually went, fortunately, I was the last speaker, so I kind of put all of the stuff into my speech instead of worrying about cutting it down to like the 18 minutes I was supposed to do. And I think I went for 19 and a half. But there, like I easily could have gone for another 10 minutes where it was mostly talking about a lot of the science, because I think a lot of what's going to curb this stuff in the future is a combination of personal responsibility, but that's not enough. There is actual, there's going to have to be some psychology that's behind the scenes that actually ends up sort of curbing some of this behavior. And so I would like to explore some of that stuff in the future for
Cool.
sure.
You think you want to? So you think you would do this again? You would definitely try for this again sometime
Yeah,
down the road.
I feel like this talk went as well as I wanted to go, and I feel like it's a first draft of something that could be a lot better than it is. And so yeah, I don't know the venue or how it would work. Maybe it's something I pitch for PAX. I'm not quite sure.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'd like to do it again. And one thing I would like to before we move on point out is so the live stream chat was
I was
for
actually about to ask about that.
yeah, was particularly bad, and I know that people said, well, you should have just made it live to kind of make your point. And I would like to at least make clear, especially because people watching this are from Giant Bomb, that I know that was not by and large the Giant Bomb audience. The 4chan board caught wind of the talk and sort of made a targeted attempt to disrupt any sort of discussion in there. How you deal with communities like that, that's something I haven't spent a lot of time considering or looking into. It gets really complicated when you have communities by design that choose to sort of go out and sort of point their cannons outward,
Hmm.
and that's certainly not of all 4chan. I'm sure there are plenty of completely decent 4chan communities, including the ones in /V, which I think is the video game one. But my understanding, especially based on some of the stuff I saw in my Tumblr account after I finished the talk, was that there was an intentional attempt to disrupt anything happening in that chat. So do know that I know that it wasn't the Giant Bomb community, and I appreciate you guys going to bat for me in there when that was happening. But there's only that again, it did and didn't illustrate what I was talking about. It
Right.
did in a sense that people chose to be jerks to try and disrail any discourse, but places like 4chan are extremely complicated,
Yeah.
and I
There's a
almost
lot
don't
of
want.
nuance there. You kind of have to sift
There
through
is.
before you can
It's a
start.
yeah. It's a very specific type of community,
Yeah.
I don't have a whole especially because I just got finished doing a talk where I thought through a lot of what I had to say about that kind of stuff. I'm almost at this point reluctant to say too much about it because I would almost want to do some more research into it. But it certainly does, speak to a vocal minority trying to disrupt a larger group enjoying themselves. And so in some ways it did absolutely justify some of the unfortunate behavior that I talked about in my speech. But that speech is over.
Yes,
And
it is.
how was your weekend? You had like a relaxing weekend, right?
Yeah, I did. I didn't really play any video games, so this is not going to be about video games. So if you don't like me not talking about video games, by all means, tune out right now. Don't
It's
tune out.
Monday. It's
It's
whatever.
Monday. Who gives a shit? Yeah, no. Girlfriend and I decided to take a little road trip this weekend to do some morbid stuff. Just because around Halloween, that's when you kind of want to do that kind of thing. So we drove out to originally, as we started out in Fall River, Massachusetts, which is home of the infamous Borden murders of the late 1800s, and we actually
God
stayed
damn.
in the Lizzie Borden murder house, which is now
Jeez,
kind of a
man.
chintzy. It's kind of a chintzy bed and breakfast. Like they definitely sell it on the hey, you want to come sleep in a murder house? Come sleep in this murder house kind of
Okay.
thing. Definitely not the nicest place you could stay in. I mean, it's a nice house, but it's the business is a little bit more of a novelty than it is like an actual like nice place to stay. But they give a good tour. They talk you through a lot of the events. They have a lot of weird artifacts there and stuff from the time of the murders. And if you're into sleeping in murder houses, it's definitely a murder house you can sleep in. I'll say that.
Did anything weird happen? Nothing weird probably
My
happened.
tire blew out on the way out there.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so that was fun. No, nothing really weird happened. They showed off a bunch of like paranormal pictures and other weird shit that had happened there before, but nothing happened to us other than just kind of like a couple of weird creepy feelings. But it's a creepy house, so you can't. It is what it is.
Well, I mean, part of that stuff is, if you are predisposed to enjoying that stuff, which if you guys
Yeah.
are going off and having a trip like this, you are.
We are.
Like, I think one of the things that people that don't like being scared or aren't prone to being scared don't understand is that, like, people that want to enjoy that, like, you sort of have to let down your guard and, like, you sort of let your imagination start filling it in because you
Mhm.
because you want to be scared. So you sort of allow yourself to be scared in situations that that there's nothing wrong and that you wouldn't be scared if you can almost choose to be scared because
Right.
it's fun.
Yeah.
And so that's why you go to those sorts of places so that you can have that. And that's awesome. My
Yeah.
wife and I have talked about doing that all the time, but we've not actually gone to a murder house. But now that you have, I feel like I need to step up my game.
Yeah, it was a cool experience. I'm glad I did it. I don't know if I would go back again because I feel like I've kind of done it now, but it was
Sure.
cool. And then Saturday we drove up to Salem just because I'd never seen Salem during the throngs of October, which I'd been told by many people was a total shit show. Like it's basically Halloween themed Mardi Gras in that town for an entire month.
Wow. Okay.
And it's not inaccurate. There are like you go out on the street in Salem this weekend and it was just like throngs of people in costume or just their usual warlock garb hanging out in front of like their witchcraft store, and there's like people giving candlelight tours and paranormal investigations going on and all sorts of crazy shit, like historical tours of Salem witch burning places and such.
Do you
But
get
there's
a
just
sense that like that any of those people have like a real like does it just feel exploitative, or do a lot of those people have like a real deep understanding of like the history of that place and the significance of some of the events that occurred there?
I think some people do. I think a lot of people are just tourists.
Okay.
Let me put it this way. I was walking around the street, and we saw the same drunk family like 7 times belligerently, like in totally different places. Like we would just keep walking, and then somehow they'd be ahead of us, and then behind us. Like we don't like I wasn't sure if they were just drunk ghosts or what, but there were just tons of like random drunk people just kind of wandering around, belligerently shouting "Woo, Salem!" shit like that, and then there's the guy in guyliner and warlock garb hanging out in front of the witchcraft store, so it's sort of like I think that guy probably takes his shit a little bit more seriously than some of the other people who come to town looking
Right.
to just kind of party and hang out with brown morbid shit. For our part, we just kind of wanted to see the sights and see what it was all about, and I bet that town's real nice 11 months out of the year. I bet living there in October is just absolute fresh hell every single year.
That's probably
I
where
do
they
not
make all
wanna do
their
it.
money, though.
Yeah, there is that. But it is a nice town. Like they actually have like downtown. There's a really nice comic book store that has like a ton of stuff. There's a really nice independent video game store there that's really cool.
That's
like they have
wait.
a bunch
Oh
of
my! You should have. I demand Did you go in the video game store?
Yeah, I went in there and they had like a ton of like used like Genesis and Nintendo 64 cartridges and like all this other stuff, and it was kind of like a nice little store. It was called Game Zone.
You should have bought a video game from the Salem video game store.
I was kind of in a hurry, so I just kind of wanted to look around and see what they had. It was a nice little shop, and there was a dog sleeping on the counter. It was great. But yeah, so that was kind of our trip, and then yesterday on the way home, we stopped by there's an armory museum in Worcester, Massachusetts. Like it's like this giant armory building, and they have like tons of like old suits of armor and weapons and stuff from like medieval and like even BC times, like just really ancient ass weapon artifact stuff. My girlfriend really wanted to see that, so I went and checked that out too. So it's just kind of like a tour around, see weird death related kinds of things sort of weekend, I guess.
Yeah, we're thinking about trying to go to a haunted house, but Katie's out of town all week, but she gets in on Saturday afternoon. And in San Francisco, no haunted houses, none,
Bro.
zip. There is
Really?
nothing around there unless you go significantly outside of the city. You have to go really south or really north. I don't know why. You would think that there would be something. San Francisco has houses, but there's just not that much. So we never really did anything in our years out there, but out in the Midwest, it's like there are catalogs of haunted houses.
Right.
So we're gonna try and maybe think about going to one on Saturday night. There's nothing like this around right now, but there's one coming that's famous in Los Angeles and New York, and it's coming to Chicago in December for some reason. But it's one of these extreme haunted houses.
It might be one that I almost went to and then eventually chickened out of going to, if it's the one I'm thinking of.
I don't.
Is it the one where they grab you, make you go through the whole thing by yourself, and then will touch you constantly?
Yeah, where you have to sign like a waiver, and you have a safe word. There's a series of these like this. I don't know if there's a term for them. I just kind of call them extreme haunted houses because they cross a line that goes beyond what you can normally consider of a haunted house of just walking through with some friends, looking at creepy things, and occasionally there being jump scares. But so these extreme haunted houses, there's one coming in December, and I had said no, I don't want to do that, and then Katie has insisted that we do it. So we'll see. I have until December to try and convince her to not do it. But let me just point out, in New York, because it changes every year, so this isn't sort of a spoiler. In New York, last year they just straight waterboarded you.
Yeah. I've heard of that. And what I remember from a couple of years ago was that there was like a whole serial killer aspect where they dragged you into a room and threw you down on a dirty old mattress next to a woman who was like tied up and screaming. Yeah, while this dude like sharpened knives next to you and started doing all this really fucked up shit. Yeah, I was going to go to that, and the reason I was going to go was because my girlfriend was super into it, and then within like a week before we were going to go, she chickened out, and that was my out. I was like, all right, I'm not doing it either. We're not doing this.
Yeah, I read a write-up of a walkthrough of one of the other years, like, and there was the first, like, the way they even take you into it is that you stand in front of a door, and at some point the door swings open, someone grabs you by the shirt and just pulls you in.
Yep.
And then the first one that you went into, you were thrown onto a table, something was put over your head, they took a hammer, and they just start hammering the hammer up and down like this wooden table. And then there's another one where they throw like a plastic bag over your head, and then something just starts making out with you through the bag, and you're not sure if it's a man or a woman. Yeah.
Anonymous making out through a bag, not a thing that I ever really want to experience in my life.
I know. So it lasts, I think, only like 15 minutes. It's a very brief amount of time. But and you do have a safe word, you don't, if something becomes too extreme. But I don't know. Kind of like when I wrote up about the Oculus Rift, for a long time that has just been sort of a line for me. Like, that just doesn't sound fun. Like that goes a little bit over the line of what I consider sort of dealing and scaring yourself for fun. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll get like you and she'll chicken out at the very end.
Patrick, what's your safe word?
TED Talk.
TED Talk?
TED Talk. That's my safe word. I'll go into my other stressful place.
I mean, to be fair, that would kind of suck all the, the fun energy out of the room if you just started saying TED Talk over and over again.
Yeah. No, so that could be one of the horror that someone could be giving a terrifying TED Talk in the corner. That That's what I'll do. I mean, I'll just join them in the corner.
Yeah.
So you didn't play any games this weekend? No
No, not at all.
Pokemon while you were on the road?
I didn't even bring Pokemon with me. We were driving most of the time. Didn't have a whole lot of time to mess around on the 3DS. So I'm going to play some more of that this week. I've got Stanley Parable loaded up. I'm going to play that. The shit. Jeff's review went up yesterday. Right.
Yeah, we got
after.
we off the hook. We thought one of
Yeah.
us was gonna have to do that today or tomorrow, but I couldn't have been more excited to get home on Sunday and see that Jeff reviewed it because he is exactly the
Hmm.
person I wanted to see what he thought of that. And
Yeah.
his review was exactly how I thought Jeff would review that game, which
Totally.
was super mechanically, but also like I love at the end where he's kind of like, if you're not into all of these sort of critique narrative bullshit, you can just enjoy it because it's pretty funny, which is exactly how I thought Jeff would review that game, and
Yep.
I'm glad that he really enjoyed it because when I had played that original mod, it also came across as exactly the type of thing that Jeff would fucking hate.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, Jeff is notorious. I mean, look, Jeff has played a hell of a lot of video games in his day. He is what I would consider notoriously one of the hardest dudes to please when it comes to just games in general. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
there are certainly things that I think you can kind of guarantee will be a Jeff game, something that
Well, he
you
knows what he
really
likes.
like.
He knows
Yeah,
exactly what he likes. He has been doing this for so long, and especially as a reviewer, you break down so much about what works and doesn't work for you that
yeah.
Jeff is things surprise him, like liking Persona 4, but like he is definitely a guy that I think he wears his tastes on his sleeve, and he would not apologize for that at all.
Yeah, I think with me, there have been games Jeff liked or didn't like that I did like, but there have rarely been games Jeff liked that I did not end up enjoying because of the fact that he is sort of like, he knows exactly what he likes and he's very thoughtful about it, and when something does make him happy, he is nothing if not effusive about it. So that can be kind of infectious, I think.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to playing that as well.
I'm also
Because
this showed up today, so I'm gonna play
hey,
some wrestling this week. We'll see how that turns out.
yeah, you had some embargo stuff
Oh, I
out,
did,
right?
yeah. Yeah, I played. So I had some stuff that came up over embargo last week that I just didn't get around to talking about on Friday because we had a lot to talk about that day.
Yeah,
I
like
did
how to
see a
check
couple.
into a hotel.
Yeah, I had some things to do. So we had a couple of games I played. I played the new Need for Speed on the next gen. I played it on PS4. Which I had not really touched that game much at all. I had seen an E3 demo, but I had not really gone hands on with it. I don't really messed with it. I didn't really like the last Need for Speed that much. The one 2 Need for Speeds ago I really liked. The last one I didn't really care for.
Right. So
What was the last one?
the first Criterion one, and then you didn't care for the last Criterion one, right?
Yeah. That sounds correct. So I played this one for I don't know, probably a solid like 20 minutes, half an hour. Did some of the cop stuff and some of the racing stuff. They were mostly there showing off the kind of like seamless multiplayer stuff where you're just driving around the world and you'll see other cars and you can kind of challenge them to races kind of as you go. You and your friends kind of being in the same world, just doing whatever you want, kind of stuff, similar to I guess like a GTA Online or what they're talking about doing with Watch Dogs. And that stuff all seems really, really good. You can just literally, if you just happen upon someone, you can just instantly challenge them to a race. They showed off some of the second screen stuff when we were talking about second screen experiences last week, and I was saying that there was one thing I had seen that maybe wasn't super necessary. That was the one I was talking about because they were showing off like basically how you can when your friends are playing and you're not, you can go on to the iPad and you can sort of like you can kind of mess with it. I think you can like send them items, and you can kind of there's not a lot you can do with it. You can kind of just sort of like poke around and kind of mess with their game while you're going, but it didn't seem like it was a whole lot of really interesting shit you could do on that stuff. But as far as the game itself goes, it looks really, really good. I mean, it's a 30 frame per second game. It's not a 60 frame, but like visually, detail-wise, like you can see the difference in the PS4 version. Like there's like little droplets of water and stuff, and like a lot of little fringe details in that game that are really, really good. And I think that mechanically, just driving-wise, it felt a lot better to me than the last one. Like I don't know, something about the feel of the last one just didn't do it for me. Like I got a few hours into it and I kind of just fell off of it. This one, I got into it, and then I realized, oh, hey, wait a minute, this demo's over with. I have to go. So I'll say that game is actually looking really, really good. They also showed Peggle 2, which is totally Peggle, but again. So
like nothing. I mean, nothing particularly different, like mechanically at all.
I mean, obviously there's new I forget what they call them, the Peggle professors or whatever they are, and they all have different abilities and stuff. The new ones, and there are obviously tons of levels, and there are a few little things they've jiggered with the formula, but for the most part, it's like it's totally Peggle. But honestly, remember how long ago Peggle came out? That was like a while ago.
Yeah, in fact, I found myself a couple of weeks ago booting up Peggle on the iPad and had forgotten pretty much everything about it. And you know what? That basically felt like Peggle 2.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, but the thing is, once again, despite it being, more Peggle, I totally lost myself in it instantly. Like, I played through like 15 levels before I'd kind of realized where the time had gone, and it has that whole thing, just that PopCap thing of, once you kind of fall down the rabbit hole of a PopCap game, it's hard to come back up for air. So
it's a weird game because it's exactly the type of game that, like, on its face, I really shouldn't like, because I don't know, it just seems like so mindless, but
yeah.
It has there's just enough player agency and enough that you feel like you can influence what does happen that you kind of keep coming back to it.
Yeah. It reminds me, I don't know how to describe it other than to say it feels like one of those games where it's like, yeah, you're doing just enough, but there's also so much random circumstance in there that it just sort of like, you can just kind of watch it unfold in front of you, and it just kind of hits these weird pleasure centers in your brain as you're watching it bounce around and do all these, awesome things that are getting you all these points, and you're just like, just kind of lulling back, like that one Star Trek The Next Generation episode where they're all like, hooked into that one virtual reality game that they're using to mind control people. That's what it is PopCap is actually just, trying to create a hostile world takeover through their use of casual games. It's terrible. It's terrifying.
So anything else there that you can talk about, or is worth even mentioning?
Those were the two that the EA showed. I also went to a brief Capcom appointment where they showed me that Strider reboot that they got coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, which, I mean, totally looks, like Strider. I mean, it's an original game. It's not a remake, but it is definitely in the vein of what you remember of classic running around, stabbing dudes, jumping around, kind of free traversal style stuff in Strider. It's a nice looking game. Trying to think of anything like super. I mean, it's. I hate the term, but it is a straight-up Metroidvania style game. There's a lot of there's not an open world exactly, but there's a lot of like rooms and extra areas that you can't access until you get certain abilities. So they're kind of you have to do a fair amount of exploration in it. And the action feels good, but it's a downloadable Strider game, so you kind of know what to expect going into it. It feels like they've nailed the kind of Strider aesthetic and play style. I think Double Helix is making it. So
yeah, I was going to say 2013, the year in which Double Helix tries to make you forget that they are Double Helix,
right?
Because they've got Killer Instinct, which, put aside what you think about Killer Instinct, people seem to think that game looks pretty great. Even when I've watched the videos, I'm surprised how, it's not for me, but like it looks pretty damn good for a new Killer Instinct.
I wish it had more fighters, I think, but other than that, gameplay-wise, I don't think there's anything really wrong with that game. It didn't seem like it, at least in the brief time I played it. So
yeah, so good on Double Helix, I guess. Hopefully, I guess those games got to turn out good. We'll see how that stuff pans out in the end, but certainly they're doing well so far to sort of make you forget some of their history, because it only takes a brief look at the games they've worked on to get you really bummed out that they would be working on a new Killer Instinct and a new Strider. So
yeah,
we'll
totally
see.
That's about what I got, though. So.
Yeah, I haven't. I didn't play anything over the weekend. So, but
here's a question for you. Did you read that Battlefield 4 story in the New York Times?
No, but I saw a lot of people talking about it on Twitter in a let's say not particularly positive context.
It feels like
it had some weird quotes, I guess.
I don't know how to describe it other than to say it feels like my dad was assigned to write about the video game industry by the New York Times, and the entire crux of his research was what he was able to Google in an hour.
Okay.
Just whatever he was able to.
they have between Kotaku and Chris Sullenthrope, right? He's
Yeah,
the
Soundtrop.
man. He's good people.
Yeah.
It would be weird having not read the article. It would be strange for them to assign someone to sort of present a disingenuous view of games because they don't have anyone else, on staff to write about it.
The New York Times coverage has been really weird since Seth Scheisel left, because he was their number one video game guy for many, many years, and then they switched over to this model where they're licensing content from Kotaku, and they do have people like Chris writing for them, though I don't know if he's full-time. He might just be a freelance contributor or, editor at large or something. I don't really know what his role there is entirely. I had never heard of this guy before. I didn't really know what the profile was supposed to be about initially, and I started reading it, and I had even less idea by the time I got through it. The whole crux of the thing is so weird because it talks about Battlefield 4 as though it is the tipping point for the entire video game industry this fall. Like that game, if that game does not succeed, the soul of video games will be lost and video game consoles will die. And it actually he uses data like saying that the PS3 and the 360 have fallen off sales 40% in the last couple of years, as though that were some damning point. 8 years into a console life cycle.
Does he make note that there are new consoles launching? And
I mean, he does, but he doesn't contextualize it in any way that actually is true. Like he contextualizes it as if to say those numbers are somehow damning to the overall industry, as opposed to just kind of the natural slide of hardware that's like 8 years old. And he also, I mean, it's just. He throws out those Wii U numbers without any real context either, for what's going on there as far as like the 3DS stuff or anything else. It reads like someone who did not really understand the video game industry kind of threw together some information based on what he had casually heard about the video game industry. And it was extremely disappointing because you expect the New York Times, even as a mainstream outlet covering the video game industry, to just do something a little bit better than that.
And they have, generally, they have done a good job of, in the last couple of years, sort of aligning, a lot, whatever you think of Kotaku, having someone like Stephen Totillo, who is an excellent reporter, an excellent editor, filing stories for the New York Times. Chris Sullenthrope is a great critic. It just seems like, I just quickly perused this Times article about Battlefield 4. It just seems like it seems like a feature piece about Battlefield 4 extrapolated to generate or present a larger narrative about video games that maybe isn't true.
Right. Like someone over there didn't think that a straight-up profile of that game and that studio was interesting enough for a story on its own, and they had to kind of sauce it up a little bit to try and make it more interesting.
Yeah, if the story wanted to be about sort of the industry's obsession with war, using Battlefield 4 as sort of a central piece of that, they would have a point there. You could do something with that, but the idea of it's a battle for the industry's soul, I think, is maybe overstating it, especially given how much 2013 has been. We just talked about the Stanley Parable. There's a lot. Games are getting really weird, and they're doing very well financially for smaller folks. So I think that may be sort of missing the point.
I think it misses a lot of points, and I present it to you as something, you and I think are equally fascinated by instances where mainstream press tries to cover video games, to varying degrees of success, and this seemed like, to me, one of the bigger failures I had seen from a mainstream outlet in a long time. Weird. So, it was just surprising on every level that thing made it through the way it did.
Yep. Let's see. There was not much that happened in terms of news over the weekend.
A couple little things. That was about it.
Yeah. So I at least mention now. If people want to shoot some questions into the chat, we'll run through these headlines and we'll answer some of your questions before we slow down the show. I will say I thought it was cool that because the way that iOS uses some of the databases it pulls from for its Siri feature is the fact that Wolfram Alpha added all of the Pokemon information. So now your iPhone and iPad is now a Pokedex, where you can speak different Pokemon into your iPhone or iPad, and it will pull up straight up. You can ask what type of Pokemon is Pikachu. The answer is electric, and then has a bunch of information about that Pokemon. I think that's really rad. I think that's really dumb in a really great way.
I think that's spectacular. Spectacularly dumb, and I approve of it on every level. Yeah, I've got like literally two things here. Did you see that NBA Live 14 trailer that I put up like right after we finished our show?
No, no, I had to run off and start the rehearsal stuff. But yeah, I should have. I meant to ask you what you thought of that, and that seems like that trailer was dropped so they could just get a trailer out and prove that they existed. It doesn't look good. It looks bad. Oh, it looks. You're saying it looks bad.
It's I mean, look, it doesn't look like complete disaster right up
Uh-huh.
front, but running that right after that NBA 2K14 trailer,
Yeah.
that is some like 2K Sports versus 989 football fucking PS2 era style.
Wow.
Like
Wow.
doesn't
That is
look
a deep
that's
cut.
not looking good. That's
That's
not
a
looking
deep
good.
cut.
Yeah, didn't look real
Ooh.
hot. I'm hoping maybe it plays better. I don't know. Don't know. Just saying visually, some real rough shit going on in that game. So we'll see. Also, the Wii has officially stopped production. We talked about that a while ago. That it was
Mhm.
gonna. Now it officially has. Patrick, what was your favorite Wii game of all time?
Super Mario Galaxy. I think that's
Fuck it,
that's the
you stole mine.
that's the one that comes right to mind.
Yeah,
I mean, so Super Mario Galaxy is probably my favorite Wii game. I think I still have the fondest memories of Wii Sports. I
sure.
think, obviously that machine was defined by the thing that defined it early on, and I have so many awesome memories of that machine in its first year, probably the first 2 years, playing that with a lot of people that don't really usually play video games,
Right.
and that brought a bunch of people together into something that I enjoy very much, and allowed me to share in that with a lot of people that don't usually appreciate the thing that I appreciate on a daily basis. And I think the Wii is often forgotten for how much it did that for people, and that
Totally.
was really meaningful to me at that time. I mean, like my mom has not played a video game since Tetris on the Game Boy, which she became completely obsessed with. She was obsessed with Tetris, and she has not touched a game since. She's got nothing against games. It's just not something she spends her time with. But she really likes
Sure.
puzzles, so it makes sense why she really got into Tetris. And when the Wii came out, like before I left to go out one night to meet up with some friends, she asked, "Can you set up the Wii so I can play baseball?" And like that made me laugh so hard
Oh.
to think about I was going out to the bar and here is my mom at home swinging for the fences with a goddamn Wii remote. And that's just so cool, and that's not a story you hear about very often with all sorts of other video games.
No.
Largely due to the controls being very difficult, and it's why, as much as the Kinect has been rightly shat upon, I applaud the audacity of trying to find new ways to get people into a medium that I really care about, and recognizing the fact that controllers are going to be a burden for many generations of people that are just never going to take the time to learn how to use a controller. So,
But with all of that said, Mario Galaxy is still like the best game.
oh,
Totally.
goddamn, like that
100%.
team, like I don't know if it's
That's still the highest score I ever gave at GameSpot.
which is what.
9.5.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only. In fact, that's the only thing above like a 9, probably 3 or something I ever gave when I was at GameSpot. So that game still is very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean the Wii has more games that are worth playing than people probably give it credit for. I never ended up
Sure.
playing, despite Nick Sutner's obsession with it. Zack and Wiki, the Capcom.
Oh, Zack
game.
and Wiki, rad. That game
Yeah.
is super rad.
That is one of those games that sort of, when I think about games that I'd actually like to go back to in terms of a backlog, like that one is pretty far up on the list of the people that played that were driven out of their minds that more people didn't care about it. So
Oh yeah, it was a colossal failure sales wise, and it's so depressing. Though I mean, you look at it, it doesn't look like anything. It looks like a knockoff from like some Japanese children's television show you've never seen before. But as soon as you start playing it, you realize, oh wow, they've actually made something that is like perfectly attuned to what the Wii is with this game. Like the puzzle designs in that game and the use of the Wii's limited visual capabilities to its own purposes. Like that game had no right to be as great as it was, but that game was super great. I remember being just blown away by how much fun that was, not expecting anything from it, anything at all.
yeah. So that is our Wii nostalgia hour. Thank you.
There we go.
That's
all the news I got. So
I think it's the Sonic Lost World reviews have been lousy.
Yeah,
I guess
I
the
read a
3D,
couple of them.
I guess the 3DS one is better, but I don't know if that is
Not according to Phil Kohler, who was talking some mad yang about that version.
okay. Well, I was trying to hold out hope. I had heard that, or the idea of just playing a Sonic Mario Galaxy knockoff certainly has some sort of appeal, but looks like that didn't really pan out. Let's see. The John Carmack's starting to give some of his first interviews now that he is the CTO over at Oculus. My understanding had been that there was only going to be one Oculus dev kit before the game had a retail launch, but it sounds like they're actually going to do a second one. They haven't said when it's going to happen, but it's going to come out before the retail unit. My guess is that it was, if I had to just shoot from the hip, that this would be something that happens sometime in the spring.
Right.
Definitely curious to see what that ends up being.
You saw that they had the Oculus on the Today Show recently, didn't you?
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah,
So they're starting to get out there.
I think the Oculus is going to be a big deal. I think
so.
Yeah, I was talking about this with some Giant Bomb guys and gals. They were both in Dearborn, and one of the things that we talked about that I still haven't quite figured out how it'll play out is that let's assume that the rumors that Sony's working on their own VR headset are true.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing that could hurt VR going forward, given that it's going to be an accessory to a PC or to a console, I hope that the differences between the different technologies are not insurmountable so that people can focus on making VR games and not worrying about making a Sony VR game or an Oculus VR game. I don't know enough about the underlying technology, and we don't know anything about Sony's, if it actually comes to fruition, or what practically they're setting out to do. But I would hope that it doesn't become competing VR platforms, and instead just becomes a value add for different platforms that just support VR.
Games that support VR in general with multiple device, possibilities kind of thrown in there, perhaps.
Yeah, there will certainly be, exclusive Sony VR games, stuff that's exclusive to the Oculus, just by the very nature of how that stuff pans out. But, I guess the difference would be like, Wii Remote versus Kinect.
Sure.
I hope that if there are competing VR devices, those end up just competing on quality and features, and not on or it doesn't prevent there being games that appear across multiple VR devices, because I think that would be the thing that kills it, is if people can't create for a larger VR platform as opposed to having to double down on one platform specifically. So we'll see. But yeah, I've heard that people that have played with the 1080p Oculus have a hard time going back. I have not tried that 1080p one, but I suppose if this new Rift kit is 1080p, I might have to get on that train and see.
Yeah, that might be what finally gets me to grab one of those, because I was holding out for whenever the retail unit is, but who the hell knows when that's going to be at this point. So if they make another one that's a dev kit or whatever, but has more of that is shifting more toward the 1080p version, then I might actually have to give that a go.
Yeah, I've been having so much fun with mine, and actually that was one of the things that was interesting at the TEDx event. I brought my Oculus with. They asked different speakers to bring something to with them, and so I brought my Oculus with, and that was basically watching a bunch of people that don't know anything about video games try that out, and it's amazing to watch people that go, "Oh, VR is stupid," and then they sit down with the Oculus and just everyone's jaw on the floor.
It's totally crazy. It's the one time I have tried it, it totally blew my mind. So I'm looking forward to more of that.
All right. Well, you want to answer some questions?
Yeah, I think we should answer some questions.
A lot of people asking about this Dark Matter game. Some stuff happened over the weekend where it's a game that was released on Steam. I have not looked into it too deeply, but this is based on what I briefly saw this morning. But it was a game released on Steam that advertises itself as a complete game. It ends about 4 hours in with some text that says to be continued, and the developer has responded to that criticism saying that their Kickstarter was not successful, and thus they were not able to produce the full game that they wanted to. So the series has gone episodic, but the Steam page does not appear to reflect the fact that it is episodic in nature. And I guess the developers said they are working on a patch that will implement a more satisfying conclusion.
Great.
I don't know if I have any, without having played it or knowing more about it. Not sure if I have any thoughts other than that sounds shitty for the people that played it. is
I think the fundamental flaw here is that they did not vocalize to people that what they were buying was going to be episodic content, and that they have this, people think they're playing a game, and then suddenly, 4 hours in, they're like, and now here's this text, and it's over with, and we'll see you next time. And that is fundamentally false advertising. Like, that's the kind of shit. I mean, even if it is just, false advertising by not advertising, it's still, you're not telling people what they're actually getting, and I think that's pretty lame. Like, I'm sorry you ran out of money. I'm sorry your Kickstarter was not successful. But if you're still going to put this product out where people can buy it, you kind of need to specify these things. Sorry.
Yeah, if you choose to believe, in the most optimistic scenario that it was just a pure oversight, that they weren't intentionally trying to mislead people, the first thing they need to do is cop to that and explain that to people, and think about maybe providing some refunds for the people that are felt most egregiously misled. Because the worst thing that you could do is double down and just act like the people that are upset are crazy.
Right.
Because I think not, disliking an ending is one thing, but feeling like you were misled about the nature of the game is quite another. And it does seem like they sort of need to own up to this.
Put it out there. Say, this is going to be episodic. We do plan to continue it, and this is what it is. Put it right there in bold letters on the Steam page or wherever this is being sold, and you've got no real problem. Like, you're telling people what it is, and that's that. It's just people don't like these kinds of surprises because that's, there's an expectation. There's an inherent expectation built in when you say you are buying a game. And when you buy a game, the entirety of a game, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it will have all the features that you expect.
Okay, wait, hold on. So, Big Knife in the chat says, to clarify, the game literally fades to black in the middle of a hallway.
Right. It isn't like
Holy crap.
there's a boss fight and then, the game just sort of has a bad ending. It's that they literally ran out. That you run out of game.
Wow. Okay, that's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then that developer needs to be straight up honest that we ran out of money. Here's what we were able to provide. Like, you need to be 100% letting people know what they are getting into. People will forgive you or still be on board if you are honest, but that's rough.
Yeah, the YouTube video I saw of it was super jarring. Like, what the fuck? How is this over? Why did this happen? So, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. People
keep talking about this Gary's incident thing. I don't know what happened. Do you know what happened?
It's something related to the YouTube personality Total Biscuit.
Right.
A developer used its ability to flag copyright infringement to pull down a video where he was critical of the game. I don't know much more about it. I'd be reluctant to say too much more without reading into it. But I do know that in general, YouTube is sort of, they have to act reactively to the whims of content holders because of the way the law is currently structured. If a content holder flags something for copyright infringement, they have to bring it down because they put themselves, they make themselves liable for a lawsuit if they don't comply. It doesn't mean that that's the way the law should be. Doesn't mean that the developer isn't crappy for doing that, assuming that that's how the story played out. But YouTube is only reacting the way that they have to react to the way the law is structured. And
also when you consider the sheer volume of those notices they must get on a day-to-day basis, like, it has to be the only manageable way to deal with that is to just flag it now, deal with it later on once we can actually sort through what it is. Because if you just leave it up and you have all these content creators bitching, that does put you in violation of shit, and that does put you in a real bad position.
Yeah. Let's see. Anthony Watkins asked, do you know when Sony and Microsoft are sending journalists the new consoles? I do know, but I can't tell you. But also, it would, even if
Could you tell me?
I could tell you. I could tell you what I know.
Okay.
And that would actually be, the honest answer is that anything even if I wasn't in a place where I can't speak to what I do know, what I would even say is could be incorrect tomorrow. A lot of that stuff is very fluid. A lot of that stuff is changing every day, and that is true of every console launch. I'll say, like, when the Wii U launched, we had very little communication from Nintendo on when that was actually happening, and then all of a sudden it was kind of, hey, walk around the block. We have your Wii U's with the entire software lineup. Come get it at a food truck.
Right.
So this stuff is changing as they're figuring out what their allocation is. What publications they want to get the most coverage from. Do they want to go mainstream? Do they want to go enthusiast? There's a lot of questions that are happening right now, and so it's tough. Even saying anything would be would not really make a lot of sense. But as soon as we're able to say anything to you guys, we'll certainly let you know, because we are just as excited to you as you are to actually get our hands on that stuff and see and find out what they've been lying to us about.
I can tell you when I'm getting mine.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. You know what? The two of us can tell you exactly when we're getting ours, because any early machines that come through for Giant Bomb are definitely not going to either of us.
No.
So Giant Bomb's Midwest and East Coast exclusive access to the new video game consoles will happen on their launch dates. So there you go.
Exclusive. You heard it here first.
Yeah, exactly.
#1 journalist.
Beach Thunder asks, do you get nervous for Bomb the AM and Spookin' and other live stuff? And I guess if we made that question more generally, like when you record stuff, Alex, like, do you feel it all weird? Do you need like some time before you kind of settle in to something?
Yeah, I'm constantly. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this about me, but I'm a little nervy about everything. I'm maybe a little bit jittery and excitable. And so, yeah, this show I've actually gotten pretty good about not getting super nervous. Like, I'm a little butterflies right before we start, but once you and I get in the groove of it, I'm usually fine. But any kind of live thing, whether it's in front of an actual audience or online, I am a constant bag of nerves, which I'm doing everything in my power to repress, showing to anyone, because I don't want to, look like a total spaz on camera, which I invariably end up doing anyway. But yeah, I have my own anxiety issues that have nothing to do with anything particular to my job or my work. But anytime I try to record a video or do anything like that, like anytime I do one of those bombastic videos, I end up doing like 5 takes, because I either completely lose my train of thought, or I just get off on some nervous tangent and I'm like, I can't fucking put this up. It's just, for me personally, it is very hard for me to control that into something that is presentable to people. So it is a little hard for me. I don't know how you said you get nervous before you go up and do live things, but I feel like maybe you're a little bit better about controlling it, Patrick.
Yeah, the moment that an event starts, whether it's me being on a panel or giving that TEDx talk, like once it starts, like everything goes away. Like no nerves. I just, for whatever reason, like once it actually begins, all of that disappears. But the run up to that, it's a head game.
Yeah.
It's you want to present your best self. Especially when you're doing a panel, there's an expectation that you're going to be entertaining. Fortunately, we are. One of the things I like about this show is that we are very tonally different than the Bombcast, because like I am not, I was not like Ryan, I am not like Jeff, I'm not as, I am not like Vinny. Like those guys are so funny that it makes the panel so easy to do, because I can just be myself. Like I can just, be as self-serious as I usually am, and not to say that I can't be funny, but like I am working alongside people who are much more naturally talented at that sort of stuff. And so it relieves a little bit of the pressure knowing that, if I sort of run out of something to say, like there are a bunch of other people who can pick up the slack in a way that, reduces my stress, that I don't have to worry about it as much, because Vinny's going to crack some joke or Jeff's going to go on some rant, and we can all kind of rely on each other to figure that stuff out, as we somehow manage to fill 3 hours despite the dinner before going, there's no way we can fill 3 hours.
Oh yeah. And I think for me, early on, especially like even in the really early days back when we were doing the hot spot on GameSpot, I think that when you're in a room with people who are, naturally super entertaining, like Jeff, and I think Ryan was, and Vinny most certainly is, that you want to try and match them on some level. Like you feel like you have to hold up your end of the bargain by trying to be as funny or entertaining as they are. And then over time I sort of learned that no, you just kind of need to be more yourself. The only way you're ever going to get in a groove with this stuff is if you stop trying to be what they are and just try and insert yourself into the conversation and into the presentation by just the way you naturally would.
Yeah.
So that that's something that I had to learn over a period of time, but I think did. And but that doesn't stop me from getting super nervous whenever I do it, because I think anytime I'm being recorded, I feel this like weird personal pressure to try and be like totally on point and perfect, even if I don't know what that means, even if I have no idea what perfect even translates into. I just feel it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think you, me, and Brad all have, like, despite having done this for a long time, like, the exact same sort of feelings about that stuff every single time, which I think honestly is also a good thing. Like, I
yeah,
think it's the fact that, like, I am a little bit nervous, the fact that I do take it as seriously as I do, the fact that I do want it to be as good as it can be, like, the it also, it's part of what makes the site work. Like, you know, it's why, like, a Brad and Vinny Quick Look is so funny, because
yeah,
Brad can be so self-serious, and then, like, someone like a Vinny or Jeff just sits there giving him shit for 15 minutes about it, and, like, that's hilarious, and it maybe comes across as sort of like mean if you're outside of, like, our group, but, like, we all know that it's just like friendly ribbing, and everyone is going to get theirs at some point or another. Um, and that's part of the reason that the site works.
totally.
All right, let's see if I can find one more
All right.
question to end this on. Ba, 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 ba. I don't know. Wait,
Wait.
Mr.
Hmm?
Sandman says, since Shadow Man is out on Steam, what are your thoughts on Shadow Man? Why is that game on Steam? I don't believe him. I'm loading up Steam right now.
That's weird. Did you see that I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is now on
I
Steam as
did.
well?
That was on Good Old Games, and now, yep, Shadow Man is on Steam. You already own Shadow Man, Patrick Klepek. Wow, that's good to know.
Hmm.
Wasn't that game bad?
I don't remember anything about Shadow
It
Man.
was an Acclaim game.
Well, then it was probably pretty bad.
I want to say Shadow Man 2 was bad and Shadow Man 1 was interesting, but that may be me just filling in the gaps
Yeah.
of history. I think we've answered enough. What are you up to this week?
I'm just gonna be playing some games, trying to get through this WWE review while also playing. Like I definitely want to spend some time with Stanley Parable, and then otherwise just kind of getting through what little backlog I have left before the deluge hits us next week. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got. What do you got coming up?
Yeah, play Stanley Parable. You got your copy of Beyond, so I'm gonna try and finish that this week.
Cool.
And it seems like me going back to Splinter Cell Blacklist is quickly slipping away, but I do want to
Mm,
try and play more than that first level at some point. Um, and then as right as this is over, I need to go in and take one last pass at my Blair Witch Project interview, which
yes.
is going up today. I had an opportunity thanks to a giant bomb user who had a dad that taught film school when Eduardo Sanchez, who is a co-director on the Blair Witch Project, um, managed to put me in touch with him, and had an awesome 45-minute chat with Eduardo, where I wasn't quite sure going into it whether this could be an interview mostly about the Blair Witch Project, because it's been almost 15 years. I'm sure that every interview with that guy is talking about the Blair Witch Project, so
Hmm.
I wouldn't blame him for being tired of it. But as it turns out, he could not be happier to. He's one of those guys that's like, people still give a shit about a movie I made. Like, why wouldn't I want to talk about that? And that was great. Like, that made it so much fun. So I got to talk a lot about, like, sort of a lot of what that movie influenced the found footage genre, what he thinks about some of the more modern examples, how he is sort of consulted and talked to by a lot of the directors that have gotten into that since, like Oren Peli on Paranormal Activity, and then got to geek out. And the one super geeky question that I allowed myself to indulge in was asking about the ending specifically, and what might have or might not have been happening during those moments. And
That's pretty great.
I thought his answer was really interesting, and sort of confirmed what I thought was the case. But it was nice to hear it from the man himself. So that'll be going up as soon as I'm able to read through that transcript one more time. But And
I'm
then
so
I'll
glad you got to do that because
yeah.
I know you've been talking about wanting to hit those dudes up for a long time, and I know how much you love that movie. So it's sort of great to see that you got to make that happen.
Yeah, didn't get to probably the one thing I wanted to ask about but didn't get to was being able to ask about the sequel that they were not involved in,
Right.
but was made and the year after that movie came out because that movie is so bad,
It's
so
heinous.
bad.
Oh, it's absolutely heinous.
I have not seen it since I saw it the weekend it came out. I went and saw it. I was such a big fan of the original movie. Went to see it in the theaters, and that movie was bad. But maybe
Oh yeah.
maybe we'll have to leave this conversation for another thing that goes up on this website.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. So that'll be Bombing in the Am with Scoops and the Wolf for this week. Alex, that was exactly how the audience was during my TED Talk.
Absolutely. Especially in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, if people want to check that out, someone ripped out the my bit from the live stream, and it is up on YouTube. If you just search for Patrick Klepek TEDx, I don't. I wouldn't be surprised if TED pulled like a copyright claim on that because they will put up a high quality version of that at some point after they edit it together. So if you want to check that out, I don't know how long it'll be up there.
Do it fast.
And that's not something that I can just put up there myself.
No.
So if you want to check it out, do that. Otherwise, Alex, I will talk to you on Friday.
Later on, dude.